Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Next Game, New Game podcast. Matt Catrollo here with you, and glad we finally are figuring things out. We now have Alex Kozora, who's going to be joining us hopefully momentarily. We're still trying to work this out a little bit here, but he is going to invite us now, or going to be joining us now, I should say, here on YouTube Live here via Google Hangouts. So we're glad we were able to change that a little bit and hopefully get him on, and hopefully he'll be able to join us in a couple of minutes as we continue to try to get this fixed. So sorry for the long delay. We've been trying to work on our schedules here and try to do this new way of broadcasting our podcast. So hopefully this will work. I know we did Facebook Live for a period of time with just myself, but now we have this ready to go. And I think we have Alex here. Alex, can you hear me? He says he hit accept, and I still am not seeing him. So let's just see here. So once we get Alex going, we'll definitely be recapping free agency, and then we'll also get into Steelers and Eagles moves that we missed, and we'll recap those a little bit, especially the Antonio Brown trade to the Rams, and of course Le'Veon Bell signing with the Jets, and of course Eagles making a number of moves as well. We'll talk about that in a second. So we just get this updated here with Alex. Like I said, should be joining us momentarily here. Still trying to see if Alex can join us here. Sorry about the long pause. And as we share this too on our social media accounts, I'm at mcatrello on Twitter. Alex is on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. And the show is on Twitter at NG_NFL. Definitely feel free to comment back and send us some feedback. And if you have any NFL questions, Eagles, Steelers, or NFL related, we'll definitely answer those either as we're live here or later on in time. So hopefully, like I said, we can get Alex joining here in a couple minutes. Of course, Alex, writer for SteelersDepot.com, will be giving us that perspective coming up in just a little bit. Try and send this one more time to him, but if not, then we'll have to probably move on. It says to send to his email, so that's what I'm going to do. And as we wait for Alex, we're going to start with overall free agency before we get into the Steelers and Eagles altogether. As long as we can get Alex to come in here. If not, maybe we can come back on another time. As far as the overall picture goes, free agency, got to lead off with by far the biggest splash of free agency. And with Odell Beckham Jr. leaving the Giants, and the Giants getting a first and third round pick. So now the Giants have the number 6 overall pick and the number 17 overall pick, and they get another third round pick too for ODB. And I do think that works for both sides. I get the talent that ODB is, and certainly the Browns get the guy that they were looking for. But then the Giants, who are, I would think, clearly in rebuilding mode now, though it's still somewhat confusing because they are still committing to Eli Manning, who's now 38 years old. And you get rid of a problem that was in your locker room for the longest time, and now you move on. I think that's what the Giants wanted to do. I think it's majority of what the Giants fan base wanted as well. Now, if you're winning, you can put up with them. And that's kind of what the Giants did for the longest time because they were winning at some point. Now they only got to the playoffs, I think, once or twice under him. But once it gets to a point like this where stuff around him isn't working, obviously the quarterback hasn't been playing well the last several years. There he is.
Hey, there I am.
There he is. All right, there we go. Alex Kozora finally joining us here. We finally got this to work. Sorry about the delay. Alex, it is good to have you back, and I'm glad we finally got this pretty much worked out.
Yeah, good time to do it. Thanks for having me back, Petrillo.
Absolutely. So we're recapping free agency, Alex, and I wanted to start with the Odell Beckham trade because clearly that was the biggest splash in free agency, and then we'll get into the Steelers and Eagles moves, all of the moves that they made that we can catch up to. And I know you and I have talked about this, and we kind of defer slightly on this. I think this works for both sides because, yes, Odell Beckham Jr. is an unbelievable talent, and he had been that way for the Giants for several years. And if you're winning and you're able to hold it together, then obviously, yeah, you keep him. But when it comes to a point with the Giants where, let's face it, everything else around Odell Beckham's not working. The quarterback hasn't been playing well. The coaching's not there. There's no offensive line. The defense has been inconsistent. And they've won a handful of games in the last 2 seasons. So clearly, to me, I think every Giant fan would say the same thing too. It's time to rebuild and move on. Now, it is a little bit slight contradiction because they're still committing to Eli Manning. We can talk about that in a second. But I think it was time for the Giants to move on. I've always been an advocate of saying that if you're a problem in the locker room, I don't care how talented you are, you're still going to deflate the team no matter what. You're still going to be a detriment to the team. It's time to move on. I think the Giants made the right move, and they got pretty good. I think they got some pretty good compensation in return. They now have 2 first-round picks, which I think they can either use to move up in the draft to get a quarterback wherever they want, or they can make a trade for a guy like Josh Rosen, which is what I think they should do because the Cardinals are stupidly looking like they're going to move on from him to draft Kyler Murray #1 overall. And, of course, the Browns get one of the best players, not the best player in the NFL right now, who is going to be a good asset for Baker Mayfield. The Browns have made other moves, and clearly they're the favorites of the AFC North. So now the pressure's now on Baker Mayfield and Freddie Kitchens to make this work for Cleveland. So as we kind of dive into that a little bit, Alex, your initial thoughts when you saw about the trade, and was this the right move for the New York Giants?
Well, let me ask you this, Petrillo, because you mentioned the point earlier about weighing locker room problems versus on-the-field value. What do you think? Who do you think is the bigger detriment to the Giants right now, or at least, let's say, before the Beckham deal? Odell Beckham Jr. or Eli Manning? Who's the bigger detriment to that team, considering all factors?
I think it was still Odell Beckham Jr. just because of his antics and everything off the field. Now, granted, I get Eli Manning hasn't been great. It's time to move on from him, too. But I just don't think Odell Beckham's always a me guy, and he even beforehand, even when the Giants were winning, he was still causing issues in the locker room. You saw how he was behaving during the playoff game in Green Bay a couple of years ago. So it's not like this is anything new with the kind of antics that Odell Beckham is. Now, granted, he hasn't been in trouble off the field as far as legally goes, but he's been a distraction. And when you're a distraction, and now it comes down to the way things are right now, where you're losing games, you have 2 miserable seasons back to back. It might be time just to kind of scratch the table and move on, because if you go to a young quarterback now, you bring in, say it's Dwayne Haskins, say it's Josh Rosen, whomever it is, I don't think it's going to be a good environment for them because Odell Beckham's still going to want to win now, and he's probably still going to have his own demands. You're going to have a young quarterback that's going to be coming in trying to work his way through probably a tough rookie season with still not a whole lot around him. I just don't think it's a good dynamic for the Giants to continue to build on around him. They need to now build around a new quarterback, which I don't understand why they're still keeping Eli Manning at this point, but that's what they need to do. They need to build around a new quarterback. They need to build around Saquon Barkley and go from there. And I think it was time to move on from Odell Beckham Jr. in that case. Had they been winning, it's a different story, but it's been 2 miserable years for the Giants. It's time to move on and basically start from scratch minus Saquon Barkley.
Well, losing isn't Odell's fault, and I'm glad he wants to win now. I hope every player in that locker room and any locker room wants to win now. I hope there isn't a single guy saying, no, let's win later. No, I see that's where we disagree entirely, because I think in the question of who's the bigger detriment to the franchise, Odell or Eli, it's Eli completely. And I understand that Odell's not been a model citizen and has had his problems, sure. But you look at the on-field value, this team's not going to win anything ever with Eli Manning again. And the sooner the Giants accept that fact, the sooner they can move forward as a franchise. And I dare you to find any other NFL fan that says that Odell Beckham Jr. was the bigger problem to that franchise, more so than Eli Manning, except for maybe Mike Francesa. Might be the only one on your side right now, I think. And I don't know if that's company.
See, I agree with you there in that case. I agree with you there. But
so no, and yes, maybe a rookie quarterback would have been in a more difficult environment with Odell Beckham Jr., but he'd also be in a lot better environment, having some weapons to throw to. I think that's the best way to help a rookie quarterback out, is giving him a top 5 worst case scenario receiver to throw to 100 times a season. That's how you help a rookie quarterback or a new quarterback like Rosen win. So we agree that this team has to move on from Eli Manning. They can't win with Eli Manning. They can win. They could still win with Odell Beckham Jr. had they kept him. And that's why I think it's a big mistake for the Giants. It's a fantastic get for Cleveland. They got to make it all work. But on paper, Cleveland's looking really sharp.
Yeah, no question about that. We'll maybe get into a little bit how that fixed the dynamics of the AFC North. But I think it's a fair point in saying that, yeah, that the Giants aren't going to be winning with Eli Manning. And, yes, he would be. Odell Beckham gives anybody a good weapon and a solid weapon to go to, an unbelievable weapon to go to. But there comes a point in time where you have to worry about the maturation of a quarterback and see what else he has around him. And I just think with the and of course you want all your players who are in the locker room into each season wanting to win. So I guess that's not necessarily a detriment. It's just how he handles himself.
Sure.
I just think when you have all that combined, plus the way he carries himself, I just don't think it really would work. And I don't think you still are going to have a messy locker room either way. And having a messy locker room when you're trying to rebuild a team, you're going to stay that way for the longest period of time.
Well, they're going to stay the way they are now, which is bad, as long as they start Eli Manning. And that's why I think
I totally agree.
Well, that's why when you said Eli wasn't as big of a problem as Odell Beckham Jr., and that's the big point where we disagree, because Odell clearly had brought more value to the franchise. I mean, he brought the occasional headache, but he brought more value and a better chance to win than Eli.
Now, let's go to this quarterback thing with Eli Manning. What do the Giants do here? Do you think Dwayne Haskins can be a fit, or should they make a trade for, say, a guy like Josh Rosen?
Well, it sounds like they're not too interested in Haskins. I think as a rookie quarterback you want to circle, it's Daniel Jones from Duke. That seems to be the guy that, at least the reports, and they are reports, and this is the time of year for misinformation, but that seems to be the guy that they're looking at more so than Dwayne Haskins. I think they're worried about, some irony here, but the report was they're worried about Haskins' lack of mobility, which is funny when you start Eli Manning, who can't move more than 3 yards between the line of scrimmage. But, that's, again, the destruction and confusion of the franchise brought on by David Gettleman. So it sounds like if they go through the draft, it'll be Daniel Jones from Duke, who has his own problems. You look at college quarterbacks who didn't produce particularly well. I think he had a sub 60% completion percentage of 6.4 yards per attempt in his career. Some numbers that are really poor. And generally speaking, the quarterbacks who struggle statistically in college don't turn things around magically in the NFL, in the hardest level of football. So my guess is it'll be Daniel Jones, but yeah, I guess Josh Rosen could be in play as well.
If I'm the Giants, I'm finding a way to get Josh Rosen here, because it looks like from the outside looking in that the Cardinals are more interested in trying to draft Kyler Murray, number 1, which I think is a whole different problem in itself. Maybe we can get into that a little bit later too. I thought Josh Rosen in last year's quarterback class, and granted, it wasn't a great class either last year, just like it is this year. I thought he was the most NFL ready of that class. As a guy that's got a good arm, I think overall made good decisions with the football. Is a guy that is athletic and can be mobile, and maybe you can do some read option things with him, but I think he's more of a pocket passer, and I think that's what the Giants are looking for the most part. I know Pat Shurmur's system can be a little bit more flexible to a guy that can move a little bit, because obviously he worked with Carson Wentz for 1 year. So, no, I'm sorry, for under Chip Kelly's system, but nonetheless, he can still do that. So I think he still wants a pocket pass. I think that probably is the best fit for the Giants, especially when you have a guy like Saquon Barkley in the backfield. I think Josh Rosen can be that guy. And now that you have 2 number 1 picks, plus you got 2 third-round picks now, I think, for the Giants, you have the ammo to get him. And clearly the Cardinals, it looks like, are just about clearly the Cardinals look like they want to move on from. I think that's good compensation to get back in return. Then you can still stay at 17 because you're probably going to give up 6 at least. And there's a slight chance you might be able to stay at 17 and get another defensive lineman or what have you. I saw a mock draft that has them getting Dexter Lawrence from Clemson. So, we'll see what happens there. But there's ammo here for the Giants to try and get a guy like him who's only been 1 year in the league, and I don't even call it a real year in the league because he had literally nothing around. It was a miserable situation for Rosen in Arizona.
It was. I agree. I wouldn't count out Rosen yet. It was a very tough rookie year, no doubt about it. When you see other rookie quarterbacks like Darnold and Baker perform relatively well, Baker really well in his case. But yeah, it was such a tough place to be. Everyone counted out Jared Goff his rookie year and said, "Oh, he's a bust. Move on." And he gets a bright offensive mind, some more talent around him, and then they're going to the Super Bowl. So I agree there. What would you give up if you're the Giants to trade for Josh Rosen? What would be your compensation that you're willing to part with?
I would definitely give up my number 6, and I would give that third round pick.
You do a first and a third for him.
I would do a first. I would basically do what I just got in return from the ODB trade, and then you can still keep 1 first round pick, which is not bad at 17, especially with its defensive line classes, and they need defensive line help, so they can basically take care of 2 needs with 1 move.
But then again, if you do that, because I think that's too rich for me. I mean, I give a third. But I'm playing hardball with Arizona because if I know Rosen's on the outs, then I'm not giving up more than I have to get him. But if you go that route, then who's Rosen throwing to? I mean, you have a couple pieces, but you have a line that's still shaky. You just traded away Odell Beckham Jr. You're drafting defensive line, which I get is a need. Lawrence would be a great fit. The new snacks that they traded to Detroit, but who's Rosen throwing to? He's in the same situation as he was in Arizona.
Right, yeah, and it's not easy, and that's something that the Giants but at least then the Giants can be patient with him, where the Cardinals haven't been. The Cardinals have been impatient with him. I think the Cardinals should be staying with Josh Rosen and not drafting Kyler Murray. They should be the number 1 pick.
Right.
Well,
what's your plan with Rosen then? What define being patient with the Giants with Josh Rosen?
Well, obviously you get him first. I think I think this is a good class, especially on the defensive side, of course, to attack the trenches, beef those up a little bit. And then maybe later round you try and get a receiver, but even though it's not a tremendously good class, and then you have to stick it out for the year because, yes, you do have Saquon Barkley, but it's going to be easy for teams to game plan against him. And then next year's draft, you try and find a receiver next free agency. You try to bring in more receivers that are capable of being a better weapon for him outside. You still have the problem with the Giants is right now, they still have they have a very good slot receiver in Sterling Shepard, but the problem is he has nobody on the outside. So really what you need is a deep threat to open up the middle again for guys like Sterling Shepard and Evan Ingram, because once you get that, then you have 3 good targets right there for him to use.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And there's Evan Ingram there as well. But again, you have a lot of the middle of the field guys. You need someone to work the hashes and the numbers and the sidelines. I guess the concern with Rosen is if you trade for him and you're giving up that much, a first-round pick and something else, I mean, then you're going to sit him. I think you want to get that guy in action. So that's the debate there.
Well, the Giants, if they make this trade, no matter what they give up, they need to start Rosen, and they need to say goodbye to Eli Manning. And
they're not saying goodbye to Eli. They're going to at least carry him through this year.
Right, and it definitely seems like that. But if they do go with Eli, and it's not if you start off, you only have a handful of wins, you're 0-3, 0-4, whatever the case may be, then it's time to say sayonara and bring him in. They have to find a way to get Rosen in this year, because I would not agree of sitting him for an entire year.
The best here's what I would do. I would trade if I'm trading for Rosen. I'm not convinced that I would, but it's possible. I would trade a third for Rosen, probably sit him for at least the first half, maybe the first 3 quarters of the season. Let Eli start because you're committed to him. I mean, you're already hitched your wagon to him, and then let Rosen come in late in the season. So you've only traded a third, so you don't feel as obligated to play him right away as you would if you're trading a first-round pick, let alone number 6 overall, plus a third to get Rosen, as you said. And then I think you probably need some time to sit and watch. He didn't get that opportunity really that much overall in Arizona. And I think him being able to sit and just learn is probably the best way to try to get him going forward, and then you attack him with your starter in 2020.
It's not a bad plan either, because obviously you have a guy in Eli Manning. Sure, he's not playing well, but you still have a guy that's won 2 Super Bowl MVPs, so it's not like he's.
Yeah, I mean, you're throwing the book on 2019. You're not winning in 2019, so I guess you can play Eli because you're not winning. I mean, with Rosen and Eli, you're not going to win regardless who's starting, and I think you just might hurt Rosen more in the process if you play him right away. And then if you trade only the third, then that helps you justify sitting him, not having to play him right away.
Right, that's true. And if they are able to only give up a draft pick like a third-round pick or even one draft pick for that matter, then I think it's justifiable. But if you give up, say, my scenario, if you give up 2 picks, especially that includes a first-round pick, then I think you have to find a way to play him earlier than what you said. Especially,
I just can't see the Giants giving up 6. Rosen went 10th last year. Like, how does Rosen, after a bad year, then suddenly his value is up 4 spots? Like, how do you justify that if you're the Giants and giving up the 6th overall pick for the 10th overall pick the year before for a team that needs to get rid of Rosen because they're getting somebody else in the room in Kyler Murray?
Right. Yeah, it's fair. Maybe it's a little high, but what I'm saying is I think he's at least worth the first-round pick. And if the Cardinals, and because you have 2, if the Cardinals want the higher pick, then and it's a guy that you want really bad, it's a guy you think you can get going forward, you have to do whatever it is to get your guy. So if I'm the Giants, I might be willing to give up that number 6 overall pick if that comes to being the case. But as you mentioned, there really hasn't been that much of a field for him so far of any teams that seem to have been interested in him, so maybe they will get away with just getting up something like a third-round pick like your scenario. We'll have to see.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out.
Okay, so let's go over to free agency overall. Of course, Le'Veon Bell signs with the Jets. He gets his big money there. No surprise there, I would seem.
Well, he didn't get – I don't think I know he's what he says, but I'm sure in his heart of hearts and in the reality of the contract, he didn't get exactly what he wanted. He wanted $15 million. He wanted all this guaranteed money, and to some degree, he got the guaranteed money, but he only got $13.5 million per year. And I think we can all agree that his market was softer than what he expected. Now, he still got a ton of money. He got paid, and he says he's happy. So, hey, more power to him. But he's not the highest paid back in football. It's still Todd Gurley. So I don't think it worked out ideally the way that he envisioned it, this time a year ago.
Right. Like I said, I thought he was kidding himself in the very beginning, as I said before. So, and he didn't get what he was looking for, but he still got more money than I think than what the Steelers were giving him. Is that?
Well, you could look at it from a lot of sides. I mean, the way the deals are structured are different. The Steelers do their own structures without a lot of true guarantees. There's a lot of rolling guarantees. So if you're a fan of Bell, you're saying he got a better deal. If you're not a fan of Bell, you're saying Pittsburgh gave him a better deal. That's kind of how it's going.
Right, and so when you look at the rest of the league so far, Alex, what kind of stood out to you from the free agency period?
Just some of the big money that gets thrown at it. Hey, I'm happy that players get paid. They deserve to get paid. But, just seeing some teams like Green Bay make big splashes. You go from Ted Thompson, who wouldn't spend a dime in free agency. They were couch cushion diving every single year in March. But now with a new regime in place, they're really spending big money with Darius Smith and others. So you're seeing some of those, movements around the league. For me, the AFC North, you're seeing a lot of changes. Obviously, Cleveland improved a whole lot. And I don't know if I'd go as far to say that they're the AFC North favorites. They're certainly going to be in contention and right up there, and they won't be the joke of a franchise they were for the past 10 or so seasons. But yeah, Baltimore, that defense has gone under a lot of changes. You lose Weddle, you lose Suggs, you lose Mosley, you bring in Earl Thomas instead. That'll be interesting to see how that works. And Cincy just kind of just hanging out and it's kind of falling backwards. They're really the new Cleveland right now. And Pittsburgh is obviously, I think, objectively taking a step back, though I do like some of the moves they've made in signing Steven Nelson and Dante Moncrief.
Yeah, Dante Moncrief's a great signing, I think, just to give something to Ben Roethlisberger for next year. I like some of the other signings that they made, too, at least to try and work back to what they lost, so to speak. But I really like what the Jets have done, and I think the Jets are just about there from putting themselves on the Patriots' radar. I think.
Ooh, you think?
It's getting there for me. This is a big year, and the key is Sam Darnold. Sure. What is he going to do now? Now that he has a premier back in the backfield with him, as long as Bell stays healthy, and then now he's got a defense. Can things come together for the Jets defensively? They now have their new head coach, of course, and Brian Flores. So. I'm sorry, with Adam Gase. Check that. Brian Flores went to Miami.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and here's the other big question, of course, is Adam Gase. He's an egomaniac, in my opinion. And I thought that was a really bad move for the Jets, but at least now they got some talent maybe to compensate for that. But ultimately, how does the locker room come together? And how does Adam Gase work with Sam Darnold? Those are the two biggest things. If the two of them can't make it work, if the head coach can't make it work, this is going to fall apart quickly as it usually does for the New York Jets.
Yeah, well, that's why Gase was hired. It was a curious hire considering the lack of success in Miami and the lack of development with Tannehill. But Gase is still known as that guy that works as well with quarterbacks as really anybody in football. And that's what they're banking on. I mean, that's the only reason I can see for why you hire Adam Gase and after the struggles down in South Beach. But it's a similar situation in Cleveland. I love what Cleveland's done to get Vernon, to get Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, that roster's really transformed itself. But it's a lot of new pieces. It's a lot of new faces. A brand new first-time head coach. Obviously, Kitchens, was well liked last year as the OC, but it's a different shoes to be in as the head coach. You're managing everybody now, so it's going to be really telling, how good of a coach Kitchens is to be able to make it work. And when things go south, and there'll be bad days, there'll be adversity and obstacles to overcome. No question about it. How he's able to keep that locker room together. I'm not saying he can't. I like Freddie Kitchens. I'm a fan. But it's going to be a brand new test because it's a lot of changes really quickly for a guy going into this thing for the first time in his life.
Right, and when you compare the Jets and the Browns and where they stand at this point, yeah, to me, you have a head coach that's a good character head coach that can work with guys in the locker room that guys will play for right away. We saw that how he turned around the Browns last year. Now, granted, you've got bigger veterans coming in here that are maybe have higher expectations for the team and what the projected success might become. You still have to manage a young quarterback in Baker Mayfield, who is now dealing with these types of expectations, for the first time on a professional level. But I think I have more faith right now in Freddie Kitchens than I do in Adam Gase, to be fully honest with you. And obviously the path is easier for Freddie Kitchens in Cleveland because of the other steps that the other AFC North teams took. Or on the other side, of course, you have the big bad New England Patriots and the AFC.
Mm-hmm. And Cleveland just has a better roster in my mind too. So
I totally agree. Right now, the way how I see the AFC North is Browns 1. I still am going to go with Steelers 2, just because when you look at the Ravens, they lost a ton on defense, especially at linebacker. Now you have Lamar Jackson. This is his team. I've never really been a Lamar Jackson fan. I think he's somewhat overrated. I think he's going to come back down to earth a little bit next year. I think you saw some of that in the playoff game. I think that you saw a lot of telling things about the kind of quarterback I think Lamar Jackson really is in that playoff game against the LA Chargers. And, of course, as you mentioned, just Cincinnati hanging out in last place. That's kind of how I see the AFC North at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I won't disagree. But, we have seen, these offseason teams to make a lot of moves. They look great on paper. Eagles fans know as well as anybody the dream team.
Yeah.
And, you got to see it come together. And that's the big question now for Cleveland. So I don't want to give them the AFC North crown just yet.
Yeah, no, and we still have the draft, of course, and everything.
Right.
A lot of other things have to happen. Stuff to go through training camp, OTAs, where injuries and stuff can happen.
Mm-hmm.
But so why don't we jump into the Steelers now? Look at the AFC North at a little bit more of a picture here, Alex, and go to the Antonio Brown trade because we really haven't talked since then.
Mm-hmm.
He goes to the Oakland Raiders. Was it a little bit surprising to you that the Steelers still put him in the AFC, especially with a team that's had the Steelers number the last couple of years? But at the same time, though, it kind of seemed like the field wasn't as big as they once thought.
Yeah, well, they're not going to play Oakland anytime soon, so that helps. Yeah, I mean, they didn't have a choice. That's what it came down to. That's why they only got a third and a fifth compensation, because if they weren't going to trade him to Oakland, who were they going to trade him to? I mean, you can go through the whole league, and I think at one point, right before the trade happened, we counted out from reports, half the league were out. You couldn't put on another 10 teams there that you can just assume aren't in play. And so you really didn't know who he was going to go to, and you all the factors of the off the field concerns, the new contract, working out compensation. You can't trade him to the AFC North. You're not trading him to New England, so you're ruling some of those factors out. You didn't have a choice. And so when you're put in the corner and you have to trade AB, you could not keep AB in 2019. It was not going to work. It was not going to happen. Everyone knew it. The Steelers had no leverage here. So the first team that came in and gave him a semi-decent offer, I mean, I guess you can call that. It's obviously terrible compensation relative to AB's value, but Steelers had no leverage here, and so they had to take whatever they could get, and that's what happened.
Yeah, that's basically kind of how I saw it too. As I mentioned when the trade first happened, Kevin Colbert got caught with his pants down. That's basically how this trade went out. Because
what do you mean by that?
Because because basically from you just said the Steelers had nowhere else to go, no other team to turn to try and raise the price or anything like that. They know the kind of guy AB is on and off the field. That scared a lot of teams away, and they wanted to get rid of him because of how toxic it got in that locker room. So the Steelers were vulnerable. It was that simple.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess just with the phrasing, I mean, it was always felt like it was expected that it was going to be tough to get the right value for him because of all those concerns. Really, I think the contract is one of the biggest concerns. I think we don't want to overlook that either because you're paying him a ton more money too, and that kind of commitment. But yeah, I mean, just the lack of leverage comes into play, and when you're the Giants and you have leverage, you could have kept Odell Beckham Jr. Other teams could have been involved. That's why you're getting the first and a third and Peppers for him, and that's why in Pittsburgh you only get a third and a fifth. Plus, so Antonio Brown is 31 years old.
Right. I think that was another big factor too. Now, let me ask you this: does this work for Oakland?
Uh,
I should say, especially we also obviously don't know what they're going to do with quarterback, because who knows if they're going to stick with Derek Carr. But if say they stick with Derek Carr, does this work? Can this work?
I mean, it can work. Again, it's going to be like a Cleveland situation. What do you do when things get tough? When you come off a bad loss, or you're on a losing streak. But yeah, I mean, it's a net win for Oakland. It's a risk worth taking. I'll put it that way.
See, I think this is going to blow up in the Raiders' face as it usually does. And here's why. I still am not convinced that John Gruden is committed to Derek Carr, but he's going to be at least for this year, probably next year, assuming that the Raiders get to Vegas. And this is the whole key for the Raiders here. They need to get to Vegas with this roster intact so they look somewhat decent to go of a product to go see for fans to go see when they move into that big fancy new stadium in Vegas. This is the key here. But after that, once they get to Vegas, what happens? And in the process, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs because you have personalities that are not going to work in that locker room. And we've talked about a majority of the show how big the dynamic of a locker room can determine how you win or lose on the field. And as we saw last year, now granted, it's just a 1-year sample size since he's returned from the booth, but I don't think John Gruden has changed, and he's this fiery, hard-nosed, old-school type of guy. Mm-hmm. That's not going to jive with a guy like Antonio Brown, who, of course, is a crazy man. We've seen that already on and off the field, especially when you're losing. And then you have a guy in Derek Carr is kind of up and down right now as far as he's in the crossroads of his career. And what else do you have? You're revamping your offensive line, which makes zero sense to me, especially when you get rid of an all-pro and Donald Penn, though I get he had the ACL tear last year. He's elsewhere. And then you did bring in Terrence Brown. But I don't get the direction that the Oakland wants to go in here. You bring in this big name, but then you revamp your offensive line. You get rid of one of the best offensive linemen in the league, I know, despite the injury. So I just think this is still going to blow up in the Raiders' face just because you have personalities that are not going to work eventually.
Well, it could blow up in their face. I mean, you're not wrong there, but I see the plan. Last year was tough, probably tougher than expected, but they have a ton of draft picks. They made a lot of moves in free agency. They trade for the best receiver in football. I mean, I could see that vision where you have 1 year of misery last year, and then you acquire picks, you make big moves in free agency because you had a lot of cap space, and you capitalize on the trade opportunity that pops up with Antonio Brown. So, obviously Donald Penn was a great tackle and, really got the short end of the stick getting kicked over to right tackle. And I think he got hurt because of it because he hadn't played there before and it puts extra stress on his body and maybe ends his career. But he signed Trent Brown, who's a great tackle. Now they have other issues on the line. Brandon Parker, 3rd-round pick, doesn't have a home. Maybe you kick him inside the guard. Colton Miller struggled mightily last year. Really was seen as a reach at the time. Can Tom Cable, one of the worst offensive line coaches in football, be able to make it work? I mean, there's a lot of question marks there, but I see the vision. I mean, I get what they're doing. They create cap space. They're bringing in talent. They're making moves in free agency. They have a ton of draft picks. I mean, I get all that.
Yeah, it's there. I just don't think it's going to work. And also, too, you mentioned 3 first-round draft picks. John Gruden's got to prove that he can draft people. And
yeah, sure.
To be honest, and Oakland still needs to work on the trenches and take care of the trenches and address them in this draft. This is a tremendous draft class. So if you mess this up, then what tells me you can draft down the line?
I agreed, but I think the difference from last year to this year is having Mike Mayock. And I think, you have a great draft guy to be that GM. And last year, it really felt like it was Gruden on his own, really no one to kind of check and balance him. You had Reggie McKenzie, but really it was Gruden running the show. They were really working separately. I mean, everyone knew that those picks were Gruden picks, not McKenzie picks. And I think this year you may see I think you will see and should see more of a collaborative effort between Mayock, a super bright draft guy, knows these guys inside and out, and John.
Totally agree. Valid point.
So I think there's a lot of reason for optimism in Oakland.
I think that's the only thing Oakland fans have right now as far as any real hope for a bright future is Mike Mayock turning this thing around. But there also comes with a big skepticism is John Gruden going to be willing to collaborate with Mike Mayock? I don't know if that's going to be necessarily the case. That's why I was also very curious when the Raiders brought in Mike Mayock for a guy that's somewhat inexperienced as a GM per se. Of course, not as a draft guy. This is his bread and butter, as we all know. But just in terms of being an overall GM, you're working with a guy and John Gruden who was brought in for a lot of money and clearly is going to be the face of this franchise once again. How is that going to work? Again, it's all going to be based on relationships, and in Oakland, it hasn't really worked the last several years.
Well, I think there's valid points about Mayock as a GM as a whole, but in terms of that draft aspect, I think you're on the money there in terms of it. They're going to work. And why would Mayock step away from, a great cushy job with the NFL Network where he gets to be a face and have a lot of influence that way to go work with Gruden if he doesn't think Gruden's going to work with him? And why would Gruden hire Mayock, a powerful guy with a lot of influence and a great resume, when he could have just hired some lackey and some yes man instead? So I would like to think that the offer wouldn't have been extended and the offer wouldn't have been accepted had there not been an understanding and a discussion about how we're going to work together. At least that's how it should be.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point because he definitely would not. If he knew, if he kind of got the feeling, Mayock's a smart guy. You and I both know that. If he knew that this wasn't going to be a good situation, he wasn't going to be able to work with John Gruden, then he probably wouldn't have taken the job. So that is a good point there. But I still have to see everything come together ultimately in the locker room. And we'll definitely see what happens there. It's the Raiders it's never a dull moment with them, that's for sure. So let's go to the Eagles now, and they made a couple moves in free agency. So far, I've been kind of cautiously optimistic. I haven't been over the top the way most Eagle fans have been with Howie Roseman's job so far in the offseason. I think overall it's been okay. I'd give it a B so far. Let's just go right to the Deshaun Jackson trade because that's kind of where this lies for me. I wasn't for it at all at the beginning because I was wondering what Nelson Aguilar's future would be because now the Eagles are paying $35 million approximately for receiver for Alshon Jeffrey, for Nelson Aguilar, and now for Deshaun Jackson. Now, granted, on the field when he's healthy, it's exactly what the Eagles need, and if he can stay healthy for a full 16 games, Deshaun Jackson, that is, then the Eagles are going to be back to being an offense that was scoring 30 points a game and going to be a Super Bowl contender, or will remain that way. I think they were almost were last year for the most part, towards the end of the year at least. So there is that, but he's one of those personalities where it can bring some dysfunction to a locker room. And you saw that with Tampa Bay. You saw that with Washington. And you see how good culture the Eagles are right now. And I have some faith that they'll be able to calm that down should you face adverse times and should Deshaun Jackson say something. But that still is a concern, I think. And also, too, Deshaun Jackson can't stay healthy. I think he played only a handful of games the entire time he was with Tampa Bay. He played, 7 games last year? And then if not, he's in for 4 plays, and that's it. At least that's what happened when the Eagles played him in Week 2 in Tampa Bay. So I just need to see more consistency from Jackson overall. I need to see how he works with Carson Wentz and the receiving core and how he fits back in to this locker room. He seemed excited, of course, that you're in that honeymoon phase again for him wanting to be back here. And I think it's a good thing, too, that he wanted to be back here. But if he's not liking what he's seeing for the reasons why he wanted to be back here, then I think it's back to the way it was before he left, which mostly wasn't his fault. It was stupid Chip Kelly's fault, but we won't get into that debate again.
Yeah, I mean, there's some risk there. He's played in 26 of the 32 games in Tampa, so some injury concerns, I guess you could say. But he's still got that speed, and even though he's, 32 now? I just looked at his stats, and he still led the NFL in yards per catch last year. He's done it 4 times in his career. I wonder if there's ever been a player in history that's led the NFL in yards per catch 4 times in a career. So he still has that speed, can still be that vertical threat, and we've talked about it for the longest time, Petrillo. The Eagles have just always missed that vertical threat, really since the time that Jackson left, and they hadn't been able to adequately replace him. And you got to get that guy over the top, force the safeties to play back, not be able to play 8-man fronts as much. And I have questions about the salary. Maybe you can answer that. Did they redo his deal because he was going to get paid a lot? I think this year.
Yeah, he did. Howie Roseman did redo the deal where it's still 3 years, but I think he got less money per year or something like that. Usually, Howie Roseman does to be cap savvy.
Right, so that makes me feel better if I'm an Eagles fan because that money was going to be a little pricey for his age and, again, the injury questions that you had. So, yeah, I think it's a good deal. I think it's a good deal for
right, and that was the other thing, too. I did not think he was worth $9 million a year. That was the other reason why I didn't like the move. But it seems like the Eagles are going to be committed. Obviously, they're still trying to win right now, and they're trying to win especially because this is the final year of Carson Wentz's rookie deal. You're heading into it before you have to pay him the big contract because once you do, you're not going to be able to put $35 million plus into another position. So I'm glad that you at least if you brought in Jackson, you're going to keep Agholor, because honestly, I know there's some Eagle fans that still don't like Agholor overall. I think he's overrated. Now, granted, he's not the end-all, be-all, but he's turned into, minus the 1 year he had when he was dropping every pass thrown at him, he's turned into a good, solid slot receiver. He's not the receiver I thought he would be coming out of the draft, a guy that maybe could be a burner over the top like a Deshaun Jackson almost out of USC, but he's become a good, solid slot receiver. He's made a lot of clutch catches for the Eagles the last 2 years. You go back to their Super Bowl year and in the Super Bowl itself, and down the stretch this past year, he's made some really big catches, and I think Eagle fans will quickly realize what his value would be if and when the Eagles ever do get rid of him. So I'm glad that Howie Roseman kept him, because I would have not liked this move at all had Agholor gone elsewhere. So I'm glad that this worked. I feel better about it now that you have Agholor still a part of it. And of course, you have Alshon Jeffrey on the other side. And you have the Eagles' 2 tight ends, and Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. And hopefully Goddard will get more involved in the offense this year too. So as I said, if Deshaun Jackson stays healthy, and of course if Carson Wentz stays healthy, this Eagles offense is going to be unstoppable once again next year.
Yeah, I think the future's bright. With Agholor, I mean, you know him better than I do. But yeah, I mean, Dallas Goedert, as you said, should take another step. Rookie tight ends, especially rookie tight ends from the FCS level. That's a tough transition. I thought Goddard played well last year. He still obviously has Zach Ertz. He set the record for most receptions in a year by a tight end. So yeah, everything's turning up for them. You keep Jason Peters too, which is a great keep.
Right, and I know there was mixed reaction too. I'm glad the Eagles did keep Jason Peters, because as long as he can still give you any sort of function on the field, I think he's still worth the risk. And you still have a guy like Halapoulivaati Vaitai, who's, I think, is a good, solid backup. Now, granted, I think he's better when he has a week of preparation than he does coming into the game cold. But
I think anyone is better when you have
preparation. But I think the Eagles are still in good shape at left tackle for right now. Would I be surprised if they draft somebody at that position? Not at all. But we'll see how things go there. Plus, you re-signed Jason Kelce. You fixed a couple other contracts. We'll see if Chris Long comes back on the defensive side. And if not, I think the depth is still is okay for now, but I think could be better, and I think will be addressed. I think you'll see at least 1 or 2 linemen drafted by Howie Roseman, and why not with this draft class? And I really like the addition of Malik Jackson. I thought Eagles got off to a good start with free agency by signing Malik Jackson, especially for the money that they signed him for, 3 years, $10 million. And he just won the Super Bowl not too long ago with Denver. I know he had a down year last year with Jacksonville, but I think him being next to Fletcher Cox in a system where guys are going to be kept fresh, where Eagles like to rotate a lot of people. They didn't do that as much at Jacksonville. I think this is going to be a really, really solid fit, and he's going to get back to the player that he once was.
My question, though, is with the money. It's 3 years, $30 million, right?
$30 million. I'm sorry. Yes. 30,
yeah. For $10 million per year. I know someone, I think, made that mistake when the Eagles first announced. I'm a little worried about that. I mean, he struggled in Jacksonville, but I agree that pairing him with Fletcher Cox is going to probably bring the best out in Malik Jackson.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's a really good pairing, and then we'll see if the Eagles can add anything after that. And when it comes to the Eagles now going forward, they need to get a running back, I think. And I just watched Josh Jacobs today, and I hope the Eagles will, in fact, get him, because I know there's a lot of mock drafts that are going his way. And I think the Eagles need to attack the trenches this draft and get a running back, and then I think they'll be in really good shape for next year.
Yeah, I agree.
While we're on draft talk, real quick, what are your eyes on right now for the Steelers? Looks like they may get a quarterback in the first round. I'm seeing a lot of projections heading that way, as I think they should. I think linebacker is definitely the case. Receiver, what do you see here?
Yeah, I mean, you hit on everything there. I think corner, the need is lessened by signing Steven Nelson, the guy that's going to be a day one starter for you. Inside linebacker, I think, comes to the top of the board, and I think you're going to hear a lot of talk about Devin Bush and Devin White from Michigan and LSU, respectively. Now, White's probably going to go top 5, certainly top 10.
Yeah, looks like a really good prospect.
Right, and then Bush is going to be the next guy you have to go after. You will probably have to trade up for him. It's possible he gets here to 20, but unlikely. And so I think this team's going to have to make a move up. But when you've addressed some of the holes in free agency, when you have 10 draft picks, and you're getting probably a 3rd round comp pick next year for Le'Veon Bell, you have the ability to be aggressive and move up. So I think if they're going to go after Devin Bush pretty hard, we'll see if they can do it. Nothing guaranteed there. And then receiver as well. It's going to be a big area of need. Moncrief's not replacing AB. That's not the one and done guy. No one is. So I look at a Keem Butler, Deebo Samuel, Riley Ridley, those kind of guys to try to come in and play that X receiver spot that AB played so well.
Right, absolutely. It's not going to take one person. It's going to take 2 or 3 at least. So that'll be fun to watch for sure. Well, Alex, it was good to finally be back together in one piece, and hopefully this will work going forward. We'll try to do a draft show again when we get a little bit closer to the draft and see what else pops up around the off season.
Yep, good talking to you, man.
All right, you too. And again, you can follow the show on Twitter at NG_NFL. We'll put the link up there. And Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora for him, for this show, and for SteelersDepot.com. And then I'm at MControllo on Twitter as well. So thanks for joining us here on the free agency recap of the Next Game New Game podcast, and we will talk to you soon.